All right. What's up, y'all? It's Dr. Paul. Happy Sunday. Glad to have you here. We got a great show planned for you. It's the Comic Book Conservators live show. Welcome. Glad to see everybody in the chat already. I'm joined, as always, by my friend and yours, Phil from Phantom Restoration. How you doing, Phil?
Hey, Dr. Paul. Doing very nice. It's a very nice Sunday. I just had a wonderful dinner made for me. I'm relaxing. I was just doing some dry cleaning on a Fantastic Four one, so it's kind of a nice, relaxing Sunday evening.
That's all. Just dry cleaning an FF1 while you plebes are at home watching. That's awesome, bro.
How are you doing?
We saw an FF1 in low grade change hands for pretty good discount this week. You and I estimated between a 1.8 and a 2.0. It was on Hip Comic, and fair market value should have been $7,500, $8,000, and it sold for about $6,500. That somebody got a great deal.
Yeah, well,
it had solid bones too. You're right, it was low grade, but it presented pretty well and had some solid bones. So
the default is enough that could have scared potential people away. It's understandable, but
well, it was raw, right? So a lot of people don't want that risk. We expect to be joined presently by Shelby of Shelby's Comics, and I think we're gonna have him join us any second now. Shelby, can you hear us?
I can. Sorry, that was me. I'm using a new. Excuse me. I hope you can hear me. I'm using a new webcam, and it defaulted. It changed my speaker defaults. So,
are you sure that Jack wasn't up to mischief again?
No, Jack is. See him in the.
No. Yeah, well, I think he may have switched some of your mic settings. Is all I'm saying.
His ass was up here on the computer a moment ago, and he got mad at me because I wouldn't let him lay on the computer. So,
classic cat behavior.
Shelby, how are you? How was your week?
I'm okay, man. Happier than a fat lazy pig in sunshine.
All right.
But
for those of you that don't know Shelby, he's from Louisiana, so this is just how he talks, mate. These are the kinds of metaphors he uses.
And and you'll have to forgive me. Like I said, I'm using a new webcam, so my cam's up here and y'all are down here. So I'm move some stuff around here in a minute. But no, everything's been good as possible this week. You and I have talked a couple times, just been conserving some funny books, been putting out videos, trying to answer questions, and just be a helpful member of the community. So,
and what a great community we have. We got a Louisianan this week. We had one of your fellow Nyakas last week, Phil.
Mm-hmm.
Larry is on the road yet again this week. And this is why when we created the show, we said we need 3 hosts because we knew there'd be some travel and we knew we wanted to include more folks in the community, just be inclusive. So we've now done origin stories for multiple people that can just hop in anytime and co-host. I think 3 is a good number, gives us a little bit more interaction, and not that 4 isn't fun sometimes as well. But I hope everyone had a great week. Why don't we, before we jump into things, why don't we just let people know where they can reach you?
Thanks for joining for the first time. Sorry.
Yeah, Ron's been pretty active in the Facebook group, and Mr. Craftician is the YouTube handle.
Cool.
Thanks for joining, Ron, and glad to have you here. Glad to have you as part of that Facebook community, which we're going to talk about later, so I will not throw up the logo right now. But I do want to, before we move on, say that I think we're streaming live also on your channel, right, Shelby? Yeah,
we're simulcast across the World Wide Web over at Shelby Comics channel, and I'm going to actually, since I had to restart my computer, so I thought that was the problem, I need to pull that back up and say hi to anybody that pops in there. So welcome everyone.
Welcome viewers from
especially
Shelby's
the new
Comics.
members. I know that I accepted 2 new members this week. over in the Facebook group, and very excited.
Yeah, let's talk about that when we get to that segment. I do have a deck to sort of guide that conversation, but obviously Shelby's Comics, you know where to find him on Instagram, on YouTube, link in the description. Phil is Phantom Restoration, Instagram, and link also in the description. So welcome, guys. If you want to reach out anytime, there are your contacts. Let's say hi to some folks. Jason, welcome. That's Adrift. Don Carter, hello, hello. The Professor, Peter Alachi's here. His channel is Experiments in Conservation. Definitely check it out if you haven't already. My buddy Hugo Danner. So, you know, Mike, I messaged that seller on eBay, and I'll let you know what happens there. But just FYI, I'm on top of it. Mr. Craftician says New Hampshire in the house. And beautiful cat. Is it a Maine Coon? Says the Professor.
No.
We actually have multiple fans of Maine Coons, associated friends of the channel. I know Hugo Danner's actually, I don't know, do we even say cat owner anymore? What do we say?
I say cat dad.
Yeah, you can't really own cats, I don't think. Not the way you own dogs. Caretaker? Anyway, our buddy Mike is also a fan of Maine Coons. Well, let's get started with, we have sort of a theme show tonight, somewhat accidentally again, but it's a book that is, I'm not a huge Superman fan, but this book flips all the switches for me, right? This is a really great book. It's Superman #3. And one of the reasons I think this particular book resonates, it's obviously very early. We're talking winter 1940, I believe. But comic books are born right after the Art Deco movement, sort of in the really Art Nouveau movement. And early superhero comics have different sort of vibes, right? Detective and Batman, very sort of gothic. I don't think it was a mistake that the city is Gotham, right? It's more of a horror kind of vibe, much more gothic. Superman and Metropolis. Metropolis is, to me, originally an Art Deco setting. It's actually like that old black and white movie Metropolis in terms of this was what they thought in the 20s and 30s a city of the future would look like. And remember, it's not set in New York City. It's not set even on our Earth, right? So it has that vibe for me at its best. And I will say this is one of the covers that to me speaks more Art Deco than any other action or Superman cover. It really is, for me, one of the best Golden Age, especially like early Golden Age Superman covers. Where do you guys rank it in terms of covers from that era? And I'd love to hear from the chat as well.
Yeah, I mean, second only probably to issue 1, which is like arguably maybe a little more Art Deco, but that aside, just having to take the iconic, place there. This is easily one of my favorites.
This is
there's not many.
If I'm not mistaken, this is pre-flight, right? So this is still when he's leaping.
Yeah, he's jumping. Yeah.
Buildings in a single bound, right?
Yeah. I think the flying stuff didn't happen until the serials or radio show is when they introduced that. Even the
a couple of years after this.
Yeah, it is amazing how. Oh, sorry. I didn't
Phil. Go, Phil. No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, it's incredible if you don't know the history, how, he couldn't fly and see through walls and all that stuff all at the beginning. It was a progression as they kind of added to the character. In the same way where, the Batman mythos, Arkham wasn't there at the beginning. The Batcave didn't even exist in the first year. It was a progression as they added to the lore and everything within the universe of the character.
Yeah, so we got very fortunate. I think again, this to me, I agree with you. The cover to one is iconic, and it does also have a very Art Deco or transition between Art Deco,
Metropolis.
Art
It has
Nouveau.
Metropolis behind him.
This is
in
action,
issue 1.
though, and people like action over a stationary object often, from what I see. So, I mean, obviously you're going to choose a 1 over a 3, but artistically, I would probably choose the 3 over the 1 just because you have the, I mean, come on, faster than a speeding train. It's like the number one catchphrase.
Yeah.
And really this locomotive screams Art Deco, right? Yeah. The locomotive sells this cover to me more than anything, right?
Yeah. And from an artistic standpoint, what's really great about this, and I'm going to get slightly technical, one, it's minimalist, right? It's just that, you know, It's not blue. It's not a blue sky. It's not a blue background. It's yellow. Jack, they see you. Also, it follows very clear artistic rules. So it follows what's called the thirds rule. Mm-hmm. So if you notice that Superman is in the top 2/3 centered, the rest of the scenery is in the bottom third. Also notice that Superman is triangled in. So you got the train coming one way and the mountains coming the other way, forming a triangle, which then also brings more to life of that center image.
Yeah,
it frames it exactly
perfectly.
Yeah. And so there's very technical reasons of why your eye is attracted to this. And then just the simplicity of the art, right? I mean, just the muscular, it's not over exaggerated, the perfect shadowing, the perfect lines, and it all tells a story with one image, right? Faster than a speeding train, or more powerful than a locomotive, able to leap, and helping someone, right? The child that I can't really see his expression, but of not fear or anything, but of wonderment. And it's just a beautiful, perfect cover in every way, not just in terms of a comic book, but of art itself. And we all know what these thicker covers are for these really early Golden Age, and the inks just pop so vibrantly on those. I mean, so the song's like thin cardboard.
Oh yeah, the inks are thick. Even the ink is laid on really thickly. Yeah.
Oh,
let's do a couple more shout outs because there's a comment I want to address here. Ben Stewart says hi, and Jason says Superman kidnapping children again. Well, I mean, what else would he be doing?
Right. Don't go in my basement.
Mike points out the Fleischer cartoons from the 40s, which if you haven't seen those, man, go watch them. Definitely a high point in animation. Even to this day.
Won an Academy Award, and rightly so, back in the day. So
I want to highlight this comment. Jason, Harry Peter on Wonder Woman in Sensation and on her own book. Amazing. Another important, and you're right, there's an Art Deco influence. But another very important influence is actually Old Greek. If you look at the art on the sides of some Greek pottery, it's very reminiscent of the way he does the curly cues in her hair and a lot of other elements on her. So that was part of the genius of Harry Peter, was he was taking Grecian art style and melding it with a modernistic look that still had a throwback Art Deco. It really, man, I think Harry Peter on early Wonder Woman, chef's kiss for me. Thanks for pointing it out and giving us an opportunity to talk about it a little bit. Great. Well, let's move on here. Now that we've all gushed over this cover, let's talk about Superman 3, winter 1940, pre-war. This very first period of Golden Age comic books where superheroes were just starting to really dominate the marketplace. No key in this book other than the fact that it's just this classic cover, as we discussed, potentially the best cover in Superman's Golden Age, but definitely one of. Median grade on this book, 4.0, with 162 in universal, 64 restored, 2 qualified, 6 conserved. That's why when we see one of these conserved sell, we have to feature it, because there's just so few that have been conserved. There's so few touchstones for fair market value for conserved books. So I was thrilled to see this one, and I think we got some reasonable comps against it. So I'm excited to talk about it. 162 universal, not super rare, right? 234 all grades. It's a book that is attainable, and we'll talk about the prices. It's an expensive, funny book to be certain, but it's not a book you're going to have to take a second mortgage on your house or trade your car in on. So it's something that if you set your sights on it and you diligently move your collection toward, you could achieve, which is fun. And I think that's something that is also appealing about it. So for context, let's talk first about Universal 7.5. So everyone saw, I guess, and I didn't say it out loud, but a conserved 7.5 crossed the block recently. So that's our subject of this segment. So here's the last Universal 7.5 that I could find that changed hands in the public sphere. Really intense ink on this, even to the point of being oversaturated. And I actually even wonder if it's not something to do. Heritage usually is really good with their imaging, but this one looks almost digitally like the saturation was cranked up a bit.
Yeah, the saturation's cranked up, because if you notice the 7.5 is showing through on the label.
Yeah,
and
it's actually
it doesn't
even
show through quite that much.
Yeah, the black ink in the foreground even is difficult to read, especially relative to the conserved copy. But nevertheless, really intense. Yeah, and
colors
also
are still nice, I'm sure.
Oh, the color's insanely, it's beautiful. But even like the child's face almost looks red instead of flesh tone, right? So at any rate, as we said, issue 3, winter 1940. Page quality here, off-white to white. This one was graded toward the end of 2022. The comments are Jerry Siegel story, Dennis Neville, Paul Cassidy art, Joe Shuster cover and art. When Siegel and Shuster were still working on the book, that's the highlight for me. And similarly, once the original creation team for Wonder Woman are done on Wonder Woman in 47 with the passing of her creator, that's where my interest, at least in the Golden Age Wonder Woman, ends. So that's just for me. Everybody has to like what they like, right? Grader notes: chip out right bottom of back cover. It's a pretty small chip. Writing top of front cover. Light soiling on cover. Light stain top of back cover. Small foreign substance bottom of back cover. Small multiple crease right top of front cover. That's a lot of grader's notes for a 7.5, but it's really clearly a beautiful book.
It's an important book. And don't you think that just with some basic conservation techniques, we could knock out 3 of these? Like, get an eraser bag on it, and probably could get rid of the writing, get rid of the soiling. And I don't know what the foreign substance is, but, may even could get rid of that.
I think you're right.
It might get half a grade higher,
maybe, but this chunk out of the bottom right here is going to limit you from anything higher than that, and I think it might even limit you from that. I think that's
the creases too.
That's where it keeps it at 7.5, and it already presents really well. I think the decision here was technical grade's not going to go up much. Let's not risk getting a conserved or restored grade. And let's just do a simple clean and press on it. Regardless of the decision and whether or not there's any meat left on the bone here, beautiful book. So do we want to guess what it hammers at? Anyone? This, by the way, was it hammered in 2023 for the record, for the guesses.
Okay. I'm going to guess I'm gonna go with $14K.
14,000.
I was going to say 12.
Okay, good guesses.
Ooh,
Not even close though.
Nope.
No, we were not close.
7.5. So when you go back to the census, you'll note very few higher than 7 in the census.
Yeah, that is. It does drop off quite a bit.
And so this right around 6 to 7 is where the value of this book starts to go nonlinear. So those are good guesses for a 6 or even a 7.0, but 7.5 is where the value starts to really kick it up a notch. So this is the last sale, as I said, March of 2023, although that's approximately 18 months ago. There have been several other sales, not at this exactly, but around this grade that have confirmed Go Collect's model and placed it right around 26,000 for fair market value. So I think this is, even though you might argue there was a bit of a down market at that point in time, I think this is a good number. And I used it for the calculations. So let's compare it to this 7.5 conserved. This book also presents really well. Also has really intense color. Now, it doesn't look quite as intense, but honestly, it looks truer. And it reads a little crisper and cleaner than the other one, even though the other one, it just that those inks were so intense, they almost muddy some of the text.
Can you go back just to show the front and back cover picture on the one that has slightly oversaturated? So my only thing here is when I'm looking at the reds on this one, like the reds and the Superman and the reds and the square and bottom and the Daisy air rifle ad, they're consistent. But then if you click forward to this, so the reds on the back here are brighter. So that leads me to think there is a natural, it is more natural here because there's just a slight fade on the front reds, which you would see more common because the book would be out and, you know, have
displayed or face up most of the time. Sure.
Yeah. So
presents really beautifully. Again, I would say to me, it presents better than the other one. Because the other one, and again, it could be a photography thing, but the other one, the ink is so dark that it actually obscures some of the details. And then of course, the other one has that small piece missing on the back cover, which this one doesn't have. So maybe a push, but I think this one to me presents just slightly better. So let's look at the grader's notes. This one also off-white pages. I guess the other one might have been off-white to white. Off-white pages here. This one was graded approximately a year later, March of 2024. Actually, that's not correct. About 2 years later, March of 2024. This one's conserved. Conservation includes tear, sealed to cover, and last page. Cover reinforced. And the grader's notes include left top interior, front cover reinforced, spine stress lines to cover, tear seals, left top, back, cover conserved, tear seals, page 32 conserved, wear all edges of cover. A relatively light touch, a tear seal and reinforcement on the spine are essentially what the conservation consisted of here. Guesses,
and it's not uncommon to have to, in that top, the top corner of the spine, top corners of the spine, as those of us that have done a lot of conservation are notorious for usually having a rip or two in that area.
Absolutely.
Binary tear. Yeah.
Oh yeah. So hard to speculate whether or not this entire cover was wet when those tear seals were done. My guess would be no, but
doesn't say
difficult
cover cleaned.
to say. Yeah, it doesn't say cover cleaned here.
Not that it couldn't have been just without.
Yeah, they can't. But they're not perfect with their detection, but it does present to me as a book that's pretty unmolested, and CGC didn't feel confident saying that it had been cleaned. So most likely those repairs were done dry. Ben says the kid doesn't look like an Oompa Loompa on this one, and I agree. I think that was if nothing, probably the most disturbing of the deep saturation in that other one is the kid's red face. But I didn't let you guess.
That would have probably
9K.
12, to be honest.
Yeah. So this was in the last month, and it hammered for 9,000. So what do we think of this?
I think it's like the lower
market,
end of what we would normally project.
Yeah.
But
I think the market's just a little soft because you said this just sold, and I think you and I just talked about this. Except for specific keys or six-figure books, we've seen the market being a little soft for certain books. I think that mine and Phil's 12 and 14,000 would be the correct estimate on this book. I think someone just got a good deal, and the market's just a little soft right now.
I think this being a book that's, sorry, Phil, let me just get a couple ideas out. So one thing is this book, we talked about the abundance of this book. It's not a true rarity, right? So although 200 or so copies in the marketplace, that's not a lot of copies. The demand for it is also, somewhat muted. So this is a book, not being a key, that isn't being hard chased. There aren't a lot of folks that say that's my grail, Superman 3, right?
Yeah.
Despite, the love we have for it here. I think when you have these caliber of books in this market, to your point, Shelby, there's just a little bit more supply than there is demand, which means they sit for a while and they sometimes hammer at surprisingly low prices. That said, there's one other thing I want to talk about here, and that is that 7.5 was right at that inflection point I guess that's what it is, right where the prices start to go nonlinear, because it starts to be where true high grade starts. And being right on that edge is where you can get more volatility in pricing.
Yeah. 100%.
So I'll give a little sneak preview here. We do have a Would You Rather, and I think the Would You Rather is instructive as to just what that turn up in pricing means for these books, right in these grades between 6 and 8. But you wanted to say, Phil?
Yeah, I was just going to say, in my experience too, just like you just mentioned too, there's a lot of volatility in that, not quite high grade, and people that would want to copy this can only afford maybe a lower grade copy. So it's not good enough for the people that want the high end, but it's too expensive for the people that can afford the low end, and that's a catch. But within that realm too, I've noticed an increase in how much restored books go for versus what they used to, simply because there's more people that are aware that there's more potential and are seeking that. So all of a sudden those books are going for more. And in a similar way here, very, very savvy people that actually know a bit about conservation, that are also buyers of books, can look at it and surmise, you know what, this is probably about a 4 or a 3.5 universal if you were to reduce the conservation or remove it, because according to the notes, it's very likely that the cover was reattached and there was some slight mending done. So maybe this book went for very close to what a 3.5 or a 4 universal would go for, and that's why it went for this price and not that 15 or 16K. So we don't know exactly why. The availability too doesn't help it, because this book is uncommon but common enough that people can be picky kind of about what copy they want to pick up.
Yep, absolutely. So I would say that we look at this, and we've been showcasing a lot of books where a conserved copy can fetch 50 to 67 to even sometimes 75% of universal value. And so we would look at this and say, well, that was really well bought. This is a bargain for a book that really presents well. You could argue it presents better than the 7.5 universal here. And to get that 2/3 off, is the deal of the century. But the Would You Rather, I think, is quite interesting. So here, is a 6.5 universal that hammered recently. You can see this book does not present as well as the other two, which is why it's a 6.5, not a 7.5, right? It's got some foxing, some soiling. It's definitely more faded than the other two books we looked at. Page quality is not as good either. This is cream to off-white page quality. This one was graded way back in 2009. Grader's notes include left bottom back cover light crease, spine light stress lines, whole book light wear all edges, whole book multiple foxing. That's all those little dark spots you see on the book. Whole book wear all corners. If not for the foxing, you know, this is a 7, maybe a 7.5, even though it's faded. Probably it is a 7.5 without the foxing. But a lot of people really don't like foxing, and this book, as I mentioned, hammered recently for guess what? 8,400.
Wow.
So it hammered for $600 less than this conserved book, and that's a universal 6.5. So this illustrates what I'm talking about.
When did that hammer? When did it hammer? Would you say?
It was just
July.
June of this year.
See, that's what I'm thinking. I feel like it's just because some of it's due to the softness in the market when you have a non-conserved book. You know, less. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, I don't think that the market has gotten markedly worse in the last 90 days. Though.
No. To me, it's the colors on this.
I think it's more presentation. Yeah. I think this is kind of a rough presenting 6.5.
Yeah.
I would be, frankly, if this was a 5.5, I wouldn't be shocked. I wouldn't be like arguing like, what?
Yeah.
Because that foxing is rough on this.
They would grade it harder now with the current scale, since you said that book was graded in 2009 too.
It was graded in 2009.
Yeah,
correct.
100%. 100. That book would come back a 5.5. Would be lucky if it got a 6 now.
Yeah, you think?
Yeah.
I think, you know, the people opening their wallet and spending amounts that approach 5 figures. This book, after tax and shipping, probably did set the buyer back 5 figures. I think those folks are, presentation means a lot, and they're buying the book, not the grade often. Yeah. And I think that the presentation here, you know, of the book held it back. Now, that said, this is the big question. Would you rather? I think 6.5 universal is very appealing if you're a purist and you're looking at these two books. On the other hand, the 7.5 conserve presents much better. These two hammered within 3 months of one another, maybe even 2 months.
That's pretty incredible.
So these hammered in this more or less this same market, right? They both hammered at Heritage, so presumably got, you know, similar amounts of promotion and exposure and eyeballs. So this is about as pure a comparison as we find. I'm curious. Would you rather? Who wants to go first?
Shelby,
I would do the 7.5 conserved because, it just to me presents better. It doesn't have the foxing. The conservation is super minor on it. I mean, those of us that has done those types of seals, you know, to like that part of spine and stuff, we understand that that's very minimal conservation work, and just overall colors and presentation, I think, is much better. And just in terms of that, I would take the 7.5. You know what I expect.
I agree.
Yeah, well, I mean, what I expect. You know, we talked about. What would we think about it in terms of appreciation, say in 10 years?
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you're worried about that, then go with the Universal. You know, because I don't know what conserve books are going to, you know, do, but just in terms of appeal and, you know, what I think looks better and understanding the conservation went to it, 7.5 all day long. So, and I apologize, I think I interrupted you, Phil.
No, I was just saying.
Part of my calculus here is I like to sort of take them both back to Universal. So Phil estimated, what did you say, Phil? Maybe a 3.5 or a 4 on the
max
on
out
the
if it was
one?
if the cover was detached at a 4. So taking into account
we don't know that it was detached for sure, and we can't see the rip.
It's true.
So I would broaden that range a little bit just because of the unknowns and say that, you know, maybe this conserved book is somewhere between a 3.5 and a 5. Universal, if we were to undo the work. So you're talking about something, let's call it a 4, 4.5. Let's call it a 4.5 for the sake of this argument, because I'm making the argument. And then the book on the right, as we talked about with this foxing, we think today would grade lower, maybe 5.5. I'm actually, we didn't coordinate this. I'm happy to hear you're right on the same page with me on this one, Phil. So now we're talking about Universal 4 and 5.5, and then you go, well, what's the upside potential? I think the one on the left is already there. You know what it is. It's a 7.5. The one on the right, what would you do to improve that book? You know, we can reduce foxing, but the cover's already faded a bit. Can we reduce the foxing without fading it further? Maybe.
Yeah, probably, but you never get the reds to look as nice as the one on the left.
Right.
To me, that's
so I think you're maxed out on the one on the right, and like in that maybe you get to a 7 or a 7.5, and then it's still not, and that would be conserving it, and it's still not going to look as nice as the one on the left, which I personally think the meat is all there, right? There's no that 7.5 is pretty well the top for what you're going to get for this book. And when I look at them that way, I go, well, the one on the left has more upside total potential, and it's already there. I don't have to do anything. I don't have to take any risk. So I'm on the conserved book as well, despite the fact that, as you point out, Phil, it might be a 3.5 Universal, right? But it has defects which are addressable with conservation techniques and materials that bring it to this state, and that's what makes it a more desirable book in my mind. Keep in mind also that this book has not been deacidified, or, you know, there hasn't been a lot of preservation done to this book. So we talk about that a fair amount, you know, in terms of the value of the book a century from now or decades from now. I wouldn't expect it necessarily, other than it starts with better page quality than the one on the right, which would serve it well.
Now, the one on the left, really quick, it does look like it has a bit of a shadow, which could be
a dust shadow,
reduced.
On the right edge,
there's
the leading edge.
There's several people questioning, asking about the same question that the path you're going down, Paul, is what if you were to try to do a conservation on the 6.5? Here, yes, we do know that there's conservation techniques that could help reduce the foxing. However, I think all three of us know that yellow inks are very susceptible to fading and running. Certain blues are too, and reds. I mean, really, the three colors here. None of these colors are going to be fall within a safe realm of doing like a full immersion bath, or which I think you would need to do to try to reduce that foxing.
Yeah, well, the bottom line is you get rid of foxing either by cleaning, by a combination of cleaning and bleaching, both of which are going to affect your inks to some degree or another.
And I've seen golden age yellows and reds really become noticeably affected. Blues,
Absolutely.
not so much. Blues on the interior pages tend to be a bit more susceptible.
That blue ink is really thick. You can actually see it come off in a wash, and it still won't change the color because it's so thickly laid on.
So thick.
Vulu
But
says
the yellows, I bet you're going to end up splotchy.
Yeah, if the conservation is reversed on the 7.5, what do we think universal would be? We're giving it a fairly wide range because we don't know exactly where the tear seal was. We don't know how extensive the cover reinforcement is. So a range of, on the low side, 3.5. I think actually certain tears, you can, as long as the book still has good bones, even like a 2 or 3 inch tear, you could still end up with a 5.5 from CGC, depending. Yep. So I think the range, we have to give it a broad sort of range because we don't know exactly the extent of the tear seal between a 3.5 and a 5.5.
Yeah.
And welcome, Vulu. Thanks for the question. All right. I think most folks, we were on conserved. Jason says he'd get the 6.5 and work on it. Bravo, man. Sounds like fun. What do you guys think of that? Fun? Love that book.
I love the book. I just saw Superman 5 at a show on Saturday, and it's just amazing to see those. The first number 12 and number 12 and below, especially. You know, those Superman covers are just so great. And
is number 14 the super mega patriotic one? The shield and the eagle?
I believe so. Honestly, my favorite, I think, is 23, where he's swimming in the water against the Nazis in the submarine, and it's like the most.
Yeah, that one's cool.
Pissed. Like that's the most badass Golden Age Superman cover, in my opinion.
We'll do. We should either bring our photojournal or the Golden Age Superman covers book and do a flip through at some point.
That 14 though, like you said, that patriotic one is killer. It really is.
Yeah, that you know, we talked about the Art Deco influence and the really early pre-war stuff. The number 3 is for me hands down the best pre-war cover. But once you start getting into that second period of the Golden Age, the wartime, 14 for me is. And it might even just take the lead for best Superman cover just because it's so patriotic and so there's so much.
The one where he's holding the eagle on his arm,
the eagle and the shield, and
America.
Yeah, I mean, probably the greatest Superman cover ever, unless you give extra status to Action 1 or Superman 1 just because of the iconic, content of the book. If you're just judging covers
14.
only. For me, that's the one.
14's more popular. I see it on shirts, just on people here in the city walking around. So it's it's an iconic image.
All right. Well, as a little segue between our segments, let's talk about Comic Book Community Awards. We had another finalist on the show yesterday, or not yesterday, but last week, and that's Jerry the Jitterbug. I just want to remind everybody, there's about 1 week left in the voting. And then the voting will be closed and tallied. And, unless there's a movement like Stop the Steal, we'll find out within a month who won. And I just want to reiterate how really touched we are to have made the finalist list and how appreciative we are of all the viewers. And again, in the spirit of this show being about coming together and collaborating, and competitions like this being a little bit zero-sum game, I'm not going to ask you to vote for this channel, but I am going to ask you to vote because all the folks here are putting their heart and soul into content creation. They're getting very little in return other than your kudos. And so thank you. And please vote. There is a link in the description here. Super easy. Just go to the description of this video, hit the link. You don't have to do anything fancy. Scroll down. If you don't want to vote in any other category, scroll down. We happen to be the 22nd ballot. Scroll down to that. Vote for somebody. Scroll down to the end and cast your vote. And anyone who wins will be very appreciative. Jerry, who we had on last week, obviously the back-to-back champion last 2 years. He won this category. I would say, most likely to win it again. Yeah. And he would be a fine, deserved winner. But please vote.
Yeah, and let me say that Paul, since we've been doing this, Paul has been super humble in trying to be inclusive about everybody and such. But let me also say that Paul has been putting out some fine, his channel's also made up of his work that he's done on his own about conservation. And I know that is, probably the real highlight of why he was nominated, because of his love for the process and teaching all of us the science and everything. So, yeah. We appreciate you being humble, but let's not ignore that, you were doing this solo long before, this show and stuff too.
Well, thank you, Shelby. I think what's interesting to me, and we really dove into it a bit last week with Jerry, is that we're all so different, right? We have this shared passion for comic books, sure, and we have a lot of other shared values and goals and et cetera. On the other hand, we all come at this with a different experience, with different predilections, with different skill sets, and with different values, right? And I think you saw that on display with our conversation with Jerry. I'm very focused on the sort of correct way to conserve a book. And I frankly, I'll admit it, I'm less concerned with how it looks. I am. Yeah. And Jerry is, I think, he's much more concerned with how it looks. The presentation of it to him is the most important thing. And if I were to tell him, which I did, this way of making paper versus that way of making paper, one's going to last 10 years, one will last 100. And he shrugs and says, well, the rest of the paper isn't going to last 100 anyway, and this one looks better. And that's why I value it more. So I think for me, it's interesting. People should vote for the channel that they find most interesting, most entertaining, most useful, most educational. Different people vote for different things for different reasons. I think if you approach it with the same sort of predilection that I do, then it'll be natural for you to vote for this channel. And if you approach it with the predilections that Jerry does, it'll be natural for you to vote for his channel. And I'm not making a value judgment on that. I happen to approach it a certain way. But there are many people who will find some value in my channel, but really align with the way Jerry approaches it, and they're going to vote for him. And I think that's great. I can only bring, we have to be authentic as creators, as content creators. And I can only bring to the problem of comic book conservation what I really have in my heart and in my own skill set, right? I think, everybody can suss out a fake, a phony, or somebody that is presenting themselves as something they're not. So I will continue to approach it the way I do. And I'd want everybody to know that's not because I think it's the superior way. It's just the right way for me. And speaking of, Jason, thank you so much for the super chat. And it is very much appreciated. And let's highlight. Yeah, I won't attempt to sing this. Anybody else want to?
No, you don't want to hear me sing.
Do it, Shelby.
What? Sing?
This is a line from a song.
Yeah.
You can do it, right?
You blinded me with science. Wah, wah, wah.
Nice. That was better than I would have done.
With science. Wah, 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 wah.
With science.
I mean, that exceeded expectations. Thank you. Thank you, Jason. And thank you, Shelby. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Don says both approaches have value. Absolutely. All right, so let's go into our next major segment here. This was a book that you happened to work on not that long ago, and you're going to walk us through the process on this book. And there's a reveal on the grade, although we don't have images. We know what the grade was. But obviously, Phil's a professional. He's working on other people's books often. And this is not a book that belongs to him. And so...
and this is not the Superman 3 we just saw. This
is
another
definitely
Superman
not
3.
The conserved one.
There's another one.
Yeah. Well, that's like we said, it's not in that same rare air with those, sub 50 copies in the census types books. But why don't you take it away?
This is like Bill's Superman 3.
I mean, this one's freaking gorgeous. But
it's amazing.
Yes, it is Bill's. This used to, just as a very short aside, it used to really annoy me that kids' names were on books. When I was young, I was very like, and I started collecting. I took it very seriously, and I thought, oh, this is defacing, and I would never want a book with a name. Providence. Now I think it's kind of fun. I love that. Cool. I have an All-Star 5, the first appearance of Hawkgirl, and it's Ace's old copy, right? Ace wrote his name on it. As a matter of fact, Ace had a few books in his collection because I've seen other Golden Age with the same scrawl of Ace on the cover. And I just call it Ace's book now. And I have an Adventure 38 that Letitia signed, and I call it Letitia's Adventure 38, right?
What? Letitia reading some comic books.
Isn't that great, man? I love it. And she had some beautiful handwriting. And we saw last week Harold Curtis was signing with a quill pen. This amazing, like flowing, almost calligraphy-like signature. So I kind of love it now. But anyway, sorry. Please proceed, Phil, with Bill's Superman 3.
So this book, if you go back on my Instagram and keep scrolling, you'll come through it. I did the work, I want to say early or mid, like several years ago. This wasn't last year or the year before. It's been a while since I've done this, so long enough that when I was looking for the pictures for this, I was even being like, oh, my office was in that orientation. It's been a long time. Like I would even approach doing this differently than I did it now, not by drastic means, but so anyway, so here it is. Full disclosure too, I was going to show another book, but I kind of like the idea of a themed show. We showed
they're fun.
Just graded copies before. Now you kind of get to see one up close a little bit better.
Absolutely. And unless you're going to do a close-up of that cover, what is the stamp? Is that a library stamp? What did it say? Leo Adler?
It's just another name. Yeah, from what I mean, it wasn't something that I saw prevalently on other books. So it was probably just maybe Bill sold it to Leo and then or traded him a pack of bubble gum for the book, and then he put his stamp on it.
Well, in the big cities, these books they traded hands a bunch of times, right? They were sold back for 2 or 3 cents, and then they were resold for a nickel. And they were often went through multiple hands before they settled into somebody's attic and lived there for 60 or 80 years, and then finally got unearthed for us.
Yeah. And this copy was really no exception, because oddly enough, as far as defects go, this one was odd, right? So if you look at the front picture, you can see it has this nasty spine roll that's not even vertical. It's not perfect. It's not even a perfect spine roll. You can see how the pages are fanned at the bottom there.
Mm-hmm.
But aside from that, oddly enough, so you have some cover tears, you have the spine roll, the centerfold was detached, and you also had 2 pages that were neatly torn out, but included and inserted in the book. And the way that they were torn out was just to the side of where the staple was. So the other side of the leaf, if you understand the concept of a leaf, it's 2 pages together, basically. So you have 4 different total story pages or ad pages. So half of it was still connected at the staples. The other half was clean and ripped out.
Sure.
So
great conservation candidate. And by the way, if you could go back, The original, I urge you, if you haven't seen some of the original Siegel and Schuster stories and art, there's a reason why it was called the Golden Age. Go back and enjoy some of these stories. This really was the pinnacle in many ways of
if you noticed on
for a long time.
Yeah, if you noticed on that CGC thing you showed earlier, the art wasn't actually, the story I think was Siegel, but the art wasn't by Schuster.
Well, these books have
at this point they had formed their studio and they had hired people.
You're correct, but also wrong. So this book has multiple stories in it, and one of the stories, the lead story, is a Schuster story. Then it has two stories. I believe it's two by studio artists.
Yeah.
Just to answer this question too. So oddly, like you might think, oh, those pages were torn out because the spine was very brittle or slightly brittle, and they just the page quality overall in this book was, I want to say, cream to off-white. I can't remember exactly, but I know it wasn't worse than that because I rarely deal with books that have worse page quality than that in terms of Golden Age books.
So possibly torn out on purpose, even as like a pinup or something. I see there's some indentations in the bottom of this one that looks like it was pinched or pressed or something in the loose page.
That's just from the printer. So those are where you'll see on the interior pages.
Oh, are they?
Sometimes the vertical tears. It's just the vertical tears on that page kind of got upset and just kind of wrinkled.
Okay.
For lack of a better term.
Interesting.
Yeah.
It could have been two people sharing the comic. Like, here, go ahead and start reading this page while I'll read this page, and then I'll just keep tearing it out.
I mean, normally you do try to paint the picture of what happened, and there was no tack hole at the top where the kid put that on the wall. There was no color difference between those pages and the other pages to say that they were out and about and getting faded. It just it didn't really make sense.
In the 1940s, it could have been in a bathroom, and someone is going to use it as toilet paper and thought better of it.
Anything's possible. So, so at least just in terms of this is one of those books where we talk a lot about leaf casting now. You know, it's a very common nomenclature, you know, for a lot of the work that's being done. But there has always been traditional conservation before leaf casting really became more prevalent, and within that, sometimes it is also good to know. I mean, honestly, I would recommend anyone listening to this that is trying to learn or learning leaf casting now, if you don't know how to do tear seals and reinforcement traditionally, you should stop what you're doing and go back and learn that first, because you need to, like, that makes you understand how the paper responds to moisture, to wheat paste and methylcellulose and all these other things you're going to be using. It really is a very important thing and skill to know how to use, because sometimes it makes sense to cast something, and sometimes all the paper is already there. It's just split and torn. So you're just mending what's already there.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So in this case,
least amount of work that is required to preserve the book is almost always the correct amount of work.
Yeah. So also I approached this was years ago from the perspective of keeping the book in a state that can be totally reversible. So there was no cleaning done to the cover or interior, no deacidification. It was simply just a deassembly. I did tear seals to the cover and interior, reinforcement to the cover and interior. The cover was lightly dry cleaned, and the book was reassembled with the spine roll, reversal, and a press at the end. And then I just have some of the pictures to show. Beautiful. I have some photos to show. And if I'm not mistaken, though, this, if you kind of know what you're looking at, I didn't hide anything here with the after pictures. That is to say, I didn't mend this from the reverse side and then show you the kind of cleaner version from one side. This is the side I mended on. So if you look at the raking light photo on the right, you can kind of make out a slightly darker hue at the center where the pages are attached, and that's the tanned mending tissue that I used to reattach the two pages.
And of course, once it's
detached.
But of course, once it's reassembled, the next wrap will be there, and the staples are pinching them together. That's it falls into like the shadow line of the book as you're naturally reading it. So this is not perceptible when you're reading the book.
No, and
beautiful result, man.
Thank you. You can make a. There's always the desire when you are mending interior pages. The only ones that really matter are the first wrap and the centerfold. So on the first wrap, you're always mending from the inside.
Yeah.
And then from the centerfold, you're always mending from the reverse side, because that way when you're looking at both of those sides, the mend is on the reverse, so you don't. It's
less visible.
It's less visible. Yeah. It's still visible if you know how to look for it, but it's less apparent.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
How did Adrift change his image in the middle of like 5 minutes between two comments?
Incredible.
Oh wow.
So
look
here
also
you can see
at the art.
Oh yeah, it's just so. I mean, it's 1940. There's no secrets here. It's very much a product of its time period. You know, it's when you look at the art now, to the untrained person. I mean, to be fair, a lot of the art is kind of done digitally, but a lot of artists work traditionally too. But the effects, the way everything is drawn, the detail now makes this look archaic in some ways. But it is really, to me, it's timeless. It's just, but it's also, it's such a product of, you know, the 40s and the golden age era. So,
yes, it's also it's the people that were doing this were trained in illustration prior to photography becoming readily available. And illustrators of this period, they had abilities that artists today just have not been forced to develop, because they were capturing things when, you know, photography obviously existed, but it was still expensive enough. It wasn't available to most people. And so illustrationists of this era, they were more workmanlike, and, you know, it was considered a bit, obviously it's art, but it was considered a bit less art and a bit more artisan, right? Because
depending on the book and the artist.
Yeah, they were filling a need in the economy, essentially, for documenting things that didn't exist. And most of the comic book artists of the early golden age, they were trained in that era they were trained as illustrationists. So I in many ways prefer this style of art to what is produced today.
Yeah, again, very minimal in all respects, like the lines on Lois's face. But even knowing, like, I haven't read this, I know that's Lois Lane, right? Because I've seen, you know, her drawn in the golden age. The way it's, notice the page on the right where you have 3 panels at the top, because you have a lot more happening in sequence. Then you have 2 panels, and then you have probably it's 2 panels at the bottom. There's just a small one off to the side, but they didn't, you know, follow a perfect grid. They, you know, spread things out where they needed to give it more breathing space.
Yeah.
And that's another part of the minimalist, right? There's a lot of breathing space around the images. It's just,
I'll say
and
something else
I've seen
too.
some bad golden age art, don't get me
wrong.
wrong.
Yeah, of course. No, this is actually why I wanted to point out, like, Schuster and the Schuster school, they were one of the top, right?
They were exactly.
And I'll say something else too about Lois's, the way she's presented here. She's presented very femininely and with timeless beauty, in a way that I think a lot of, again, artists today are not able to convey. And that's one of the things I love about this. Again, I'm humbled. Vulu, thank you so much for the super sticker, the super chat. I appreciate it. We're going to continue to bring this show to everybody in honor of these super chatters, commercial free if you're watching it live. And we're going to sort of pass that on to the viewers. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Very much appreciated. And I will get back to some comments, including one of Vulu's earlier ones. But I want to let Phil get through the segment, and then I'll.
And there's one thing I want to point out that Phil did. Some people have asked. So Phil told us that those were due to the printer, and notice that he just did the spine, and he did not try to Japanese paper the defects from the printer there at the bottom.
It's a printer defect. Correct. Exactly. That's a good, and just, I think for what it's worth too, this is when I was documenting more and like very excited to be documenting, and sometimes doing it before I even did final. So the picture on the right, I did press that area prior to the book being reassembled. That was just after I did the mending. So it would be flattened more. But yeah, to your point, there is an idea of kind of doing less is more, and part of that is knowing what you're working on. And in this case,
exactly,
those, are natural. And in fact, if you go on eBay and look through a lot of books from people just selling books I don't know, very often on Golden Age books, they'll say there's tears on the inside, and they'll take close-up pictures on this because they don't they're like, oh no, it's a poor grade now because someone tore all this. It's not very common, but if you look enough, you'll see that, and
you will.
Exactly what we're talking about. If you know, you know.
Yeah, those have been watching the channel for a while know that I did a very in-depth conservation of America's Best Comics number 12. It's a Schaumburg cover from World War II, featuring a bunch of the Needor. I'm going to continue to say Needor publication heroes, and I pointed out when I had to mend almost every page in that book. I pointed out that I specifically did not mend those little tears from the paper grippers.
Well, and then that's why both of us, our first video is always an assessment, and you and I both talk through our thought process. I'm going to mend this. I'm not going to mend this. This is why. This is where we think it originated from, you know, and we talk through that process. That might be the most boring part.
And I have that.
It's the most important part.
Absolutely.
Preparation.
Absolutely. And I have a video that I call the 9 Steps of Comic Book Conservation, and it's adapted from the actual process of document conservation by scientists. It's kind of the process that's been accepted by that profession, and I've just applied it to comic books. And I go through that process anytime I do a major conservation, and I often sort of link back to it. So longtime viewers of the channel know that the assessment and the game plan are critical, because failing to plan is planning to fail, as they say.
That's a very good point. And I'm going to piggyback on what you just said in a way to answer this question too. One, thanks for the kind words. And to kind of answer it in the most simplistic way I can. I think a lot of people use CGC as a benchmark. If you're going to submit a book and they say it's coming back professional, and you have to take that with a grain of salt. I do personally, because I know that sometimes there's multiple ways to do something, and CGC can only grade the book in front of them. But within a reasonable realm, they kind of have some benchmarks. So I just started off doing aggressive work on low value books. I mean, I'm talking like $1 and $2 Westerns from the 40s, like that were trashed. I even saved some of them to look, and I look now, I'm like, I spent all the time on this book. That's not worth it. Like, it's not worth it by any value stance, but I kept it as a token of it was the time needed to put in to get better. And the amount of books I worked on until I finally said, you know what, I'll spend some money and send them to CGC and see what they say. It was years.
Yeah.
You know, and I understand that sounds crazy maybe, because some people want to be like leaf casting in 2 months and submitting books and stuff. It's like, I worked on books for years before I submitted them to CGCs. And that's just me, because I'm a very methodical person. I was doing a lot of this before there was any YouTube videos of other people doing it. There was a couple other people, but not really publicly. So I had to figure out a lot. And to that point too, can't give away everything, because some things you learn over time, but if you know how to do tear seals on interior pages, and you also know that I didn't wash this book here, and you also know if you've tried it, you're like, how are there not tide lines there from when you mended the spine split seal? And I'll be like, yep, exactly. Because there are ways to know how to do this. I say that to pride myself, because the the late Mike DeCellis from Hero Restoration would send me books because he was like, I don't know how you're able to do this, and it's easier for me just to send them. He subcontracted some books to me because I you know, I've been doing this for quite a while.
Yep.
So I appreciate the kind words.
Yeah, and you know,
well
I
deserved.
think I have like a 4-part series, Practice Makes Perfect, where I just, you know, did low quality books. And trust me, I have several videos like that I did not bore y'all with in posting, but you know, I did at least do those 4 that's showing, just practice. And I know I'm still learning, and I'm amazed. I'm probably going to hit Phil up after the show on some questions.
Let's I remember when I got this back together, I was very satisfied with
beautiful
just how flush the spine looked after the spine roll was taken out too. This is just a close up before you get to see the full shot. And then here's a nice full shot of that before and after.
What a nice transformation.
Thank you.
Yeah,
thank you.
Beautiful.
Amazing.
There's some of those little things too that you don't notice. I think the only thing I would have done differently now is I probably would have given it a slightly more thorough dry cleaning, and it's subtle. And I did clean a little bit of that dirt beneath the word Superman and like the center right there. You know, it is a little cleaner, but I probably could have given it a little bit more of an extensive cleaning. But overall, it still looks very nice. But I just want to point out like all those bends and creases in the top right that you look on the right after. Perfect and flat and like not disturbed. Spine is very flush with where it's supposed to be. And also just note, like when you see a little bit of fanning on the bottom right and that little white strip kind of on the left spine there, that's not to say the book isn't back in its true state. It is here. This is just how it was printed. Like they're not all perfect. That black line does not always perfectly line up. When you do a spiral reversal, it's not about making it going against that. It's putting the book back in this book's original orientation. Every book's orientation.
Yes, that you can feel the book of how it wants to move, you know, and I tried explaining that in one video, but I don't think I did a good job. So I can definitely see the cleaning areas like right near that top staple, right underneath, or right near the mountain.
Oh yeah. The yellow field is quite a bit brighter.
Yeah, it's a lot brighter.
I mean, I definitely went over it as well thoroughly, but I think I would have used a document cleaning pad now instead of just my it's not a secret, a Staedtler eraser that I have where you just kind of keep cutting the edge off to have a nice crisp pointed line, and that you're doing this motion where you're trying to not touch the paper and you're touching.
For those that haven't seen it, do you want to show that off?
So I'll show you, because I mean I have no problem doing this because this takes a long time to get used to. If this is the surface, you're like going like this as others have said, you're it's like cleaning it.
You're almost dabbing. You're almost dabbing versus rubbing.
Exactly. That's exactly right. You're almost dabbing versus rubbing. So you're trying to do it to the point where you're just touching the surface, and it's so easy to overdo it. And once you do it and you overdo it, you'll see where you did it, and then you'll say, I hate doing this, and I just no, and there's no margin for error. If you mess up and you take off color, you'll see it. So you have to know what you're doing, or it's so easy to overdo it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I know that me and Dr. Paul make it look easy when you see us doing it on camera, but that's because we've done hundreds, and you can't.
We spent too much time.
Yeah, you can't feel what we're feeling and how we're doing it. You know, it looks like we're just, and sometimes I am. I'll be honest with you, I don't have patience, but
we can't tell them that. You have to patience.
So I still have a short segment I want to discuss. So we don't have pictures, but you do know the grade this book.
Yeah, I think there was just one.
Oh yeah,
this might be the last one. Just the last back.
Yeah.
So
what a dramatic difference here.
The for most books, and again, this isn't the rule, but it is a very good guideline, is that if you look on the picture on the right, you see the pages on the top left are kind of fanned out. That's natural. So you almost want to get it where it's it's perfectly lined up with the cover on the bottom left, but you're gonna see that fanning. Sorry, my point is that fanning on the top left is natural, and then if you run that added line, you'll see it's basically perpendicular with the spine. Excuse me, parallel with the spine.
Yeah,
it's
because as it was sheared in the press, the paper actually shifts a little bit.
Well, and covers and interiors were printed and I think cut in some cases at different places. Then they were assembled. I don't think there may have been a final cut afterwards. That's why you see some of these interiors sticking out from these Golden Age books.
So this book too, I really did spend the time to try to find it. All I know is from my client that I did the work on, he said that the book came back at a 6.0 conserved. So that was all the information I got. I never found a picture of it online, unfortunately, and this was from a couple of years ago. But if Dr. Paul, you don't have to, but if you were to look back in the video after watching this on the replay, you can see in the chart that he has for the amount of graded copies on the line, you will see a 6.0 on that scale.
I believe there's actually two,
it's one
Phil.
of this.
Yeah, I believe there's actually two 6.0 conserved. I did look, maybe I was wrong about that, but there is definitely at least one. I did look. I have not seen a public sale of a conserved 6.0, so I think this got locked into somebody's PC, which bravo, well done, collector. Before we move on, what would you estimate the grade of the book as you received it? 2 pages torn out.
Yeah, that's the so I think
present.
I think
pretty significant spine roll, some soiling, obviously, some creases.
He was worried that the book was going to be graded with the qualified grade no matter what. So it seemed obvious to just do the conservation work because you're getting the technical grade up so much higher than what the universal grade would be, even if it wasn't graded qualified, that it just made sense to do it. Because I think I estimated, and unless I'm mistaken, I told him this is going to hit a 6, and he's like, "You were right on the money. It came back exactly at a 6." So I was like, not to toot my own horn, but
I'm actually asking though, what did you estimate the raw book when you received it at?
Yeah, I mean, probably a 1.5 at best.
Think so?
Well, I would say this:
how bad was the cover tear?
It wasn't bad.
You didn't. I don't think you showed us the pictures of the repairs on that.
No, I didn't have any photos, unfortunately. And in fact, I can't even remember now that I'm thinking of it, where it probably was some spine splits, and it was probably and that top right area that was disturbed where those creases were is where some of the tears were. But I think the more important thing was that I viewed the book where, I mean, one page is already significant, but 2 pages completely split and torn out. To me, I viewed that at least equal to a book where the cover was totally split and detached, and that book would get a 1.5. So I was figuring, while the cover is worth more than the interior, because you have 2 interior pages with the spine roll and the other defects, I mean, maybe a 1.5, 1.8 at best. But I don't think, I think you're pushing it once you get above that.
Oh, I definitely value your opinion. You have a lot more experience submitting to CGC than I do, but
maybe I'm wrong.
I would have placed it a bit higher. More like in a
2.5.
I would put it in a 2.5 type category. Just based on the idea that the cover is 80% of the grade, and I believe technically, if there are no other, well, I shouldn't say no other. If there's not a significant enough accumulation of other defects, a full split spine can still achieve a 2.0. That's the max for a full split, I do believe, according to the book.
Can I play devil's advocate?
Of course. That's why I want to talk about it.
So if a Hulk 181 with the Marvel value stamp cut out, and granted it's something missing, it's not just something split and detached, But if the interior on that book counts so much because of what it is, I think that could make the case that interior damage, if significant enough, can count no matter what the book is. And
I agree, but I think it's the difference between missing versus split.
It's true.
A full split cover maxes out at 2, and if it's got any other significant defects, as you say, it's going to be a 1.8 or a 1.5, right?
And if the pages weren't torn out, then you would make the case that, I mean, a 4-point, so at a 2.0 universal, a 4-point difference, if it was a 6 universal, that seems fair enough to detract. So
that's my point. So here's my point. I personally would put this closer to a 2.5, although I'll be the first to say you have more experience than I do in this. That said, whether you went from a 2.5 to a 6 or a 1.5 to a 6, unbelievable transformation. Clearly worth the time and energy and investment. Clearly, again, very importantly, turning it into a book that you can flip through the pages and read. It presents much better. You know, the actual starting technical grade here, even if we placed it in a range between 1.5 and 2.5, dramatically improved. And again, I would defer to you. I'm more just presenting what I would have thought in a vacuum.
I just remembered, if I could, it would take me so long. My client sold this to someone, and that person I saw post the book, and I made a comment that I did the work, and they immediately reached out and said, "Hey, do you think, like, what do you think the best universal grade on this book would be?" And I literally had this conversation. I forgot until right now. Right now. And I had the conversation to say, well, you could do it, but you're going to have 2 pages that are going to be split and detached. And based on that, he was like, I love the book as is. I'm just going to leave it as is. And it wasn't even a question of what the technical grade was.
And frankly, again, I think there was equity created, whether it was a 1.5 or a 2.5, frankly. But even if there wasn't, I'd make the argument for the work just on the preservation alone. Because loose pages eventually are going to be lost. They're going to be, they're going to stick out further. The edges are going to start to chip, all kind of problems, right?
I mean, like it lined up. It is pretty amazing that the pages lasted over time. And then there's no way to know when they were taken out. But honestly, whether they were taken out last week or 70 years ago, the fact that all of the paper was there, I didn't have to worry about small pieces adding. I just had to mend what was there. That is only going to get worse over time. That is
that's what I'm saying. Like, I think there's no question that this should have been done.
Yeah, absolutely. You start with good paper quality with this.
So
let's do a couple of
really quick. We got 2 people that came over from my channel. Say hi to Southern Comic Geek and Steven Spock. Welcome, glad y'all are here. And then I also want to say thank you to all the people that are answering questions back and forth in the chat. I love seeing the community interacting and sharing with each other.
So let me highlight a few here. I haven't seen Manuel Bull before. Welcome. Thank you. Vulu says, I always think about the original buyer when I open a Silver Age book. You know, this is to the point of, you know, Bill having signed this book, right? And a similar content from Jason. There's a cool bit of historical provenance feeling, seeing kids' signatures on books. We were talking about swapping a comic book in the Golden Age for a pack of gum. And Joe said it had to be Bazooka Joe. Obviously, it was.
It had to be.
Bubble we've already talked about this, but I do want to say, you know, when I met Phil and became aware of him and his work, well, I became aware of his work through Instagram, and then I met him in person, and I was just impressed with his reverence for the books and his reverence for the craft and his approach. And so he was definitely on my must-have co-host list for the creation of this show. And in fact, he was the one, I was thinking we would create this show like a year from now. He was the one that said to me, let's just do it now. And I'm so glad he did. So thank you. I appreciate you. Glad to have you here with me.
Glad to be here.
Jason says, I wonder if pencilers relied on swipes more than later artists who had those photo indexes. I have a disease. So like I actually just read that indices because I'm like, that's not how you pluralize the word index, Jason. Anyway, sorry, Jason. I can't help myself. It really is disease. So it turns out we know a bit about this. Jack Kirby, who was, of course, a Golden Age artist and who spanned all the way, into the Bronze Age, he had a vast photo collection that he used for reference material. And we do know that he had swipes. He swiped images from fashion magazines. He swiped images from all kinds of places. For me, I think if you're swiping a photo and you're making a drawing and you're, changing some details around, that is well within the realm, especially in the era when we didn't have the internet. And like some of these guys were asked to draw tigers and they had never seen a tiger in their life. And they didn't have, you have to go and find some photo reference for this stuff, right? So on the other hand, swiping other people's art is icky to me, unless it's done as a specific homage, right?
But so in the artist community, that's called morgue files. And when I was actually in art school years ago, they actually sent you like pieces from magazines and stuff to help start your own morgue file.
Wow.
For reference. Not swiping, but for reference, to like the tiger example is a good one. And John Byrne will not admit this, but I bumped into him at a drugstore once, and he's looking at a Penthouse magazine, and he said this was the best magazine to buy for doing female superheroes. So John Byrne will deny that ever happened if you ask him.
I'm going to not comment. I'm going to not comment. Because my mom watches the show. Jason, I agree. It's Ned Pines, right? And he ran about at least 4 different companies. There was Pines, it was Better. And so most people group them all together to call them Neater Publications. Nedor. So it's a made up word, right? Because it's Ned Pines. And so for me, when I have a made up word, I use what I would normally use for pronunciation of that word if it was a real word. But I have had people tell me that they think it ought to be Nedor for the reason you point out here, because it is named for Ned Pines. So yeah, I don't know that we have a recording of how he pronounced it or if anybody did a phonetic back in the day. I think we will never really know. But you make a good point. And that's why sometimes when I say it, I say, I don't really know, but this is how I pronounce it and why. The professor said North Bennett State School. I'm not sure what North Bennett ST is offering a 2-year program in conservation. Presumably that's maybe a community college or a university.
Salem, Boston area.
In Massachusetts. So maybe the professor will tell us more about it. Jason asked, is it about paper conservation? And the professor said he believes so. I don't know Dibby, so I wanted to say hi, Dibby. Says Dylan James. Welcome to the channel. Appreciate having you here. And maybe this is
Dylan
Dibby's channel here.
Yeah, he did drop it. I went and checked it out. He's got about 7 videos on some cleaning and conservation, so look very interesting. I'll check out your videos, Dylan.
Awesome. All right, so a few other comments about folks mangling books. I don't want to relive it. I don't want to make them relive it. Southern Comic Geek says, howdy, welcome to the channel. Great to see you. Steven Spock is here with a Vulcan greeting. Appreciate having you here.
Yep, and Southern Comic Geek is my good friend that we do our summer fun tour every year and hit like Dallas Fan Expo. He's got a great Instagram channel. He collects original art and he always shows off his new purchases. So if you want to see
fun.
some cool original art and get jelly like I do of him getting it, and go and check him out. So Southern Comic Geek over on IG.
Awesome. Knights of Old, welcome back to the channel, says, I have 50s manga I'd like to mend tears on. What should I use? In a vacuum, I would say you're going to use the same materials you use for our comic books in terms of newsprint is what that material is typically. I'd love to see it before I advise more specifically, but so you're going to be looking at, I think, especially apropos here, you're going to be looking at Japanese paper, traditional mending, and so Japanese paper and wheat paste would be the sort of traditional, or nori paste, I guess. Actually, if you wanted to go true manga correct, period correct, you would do nori paste. So that's basically starch paste made from rice rather than wheat. Love to see that project. Share it with us in the Facebook group. And I think I'm going to use that as a segue to talk about the Facebook group just a little bit, and then we'll say goodbye to everybody. I want to thank Shelby for allowing me to recruit him as a moderator. So he's our second moderator for the group, and the group is growing quickly and it's becoming more active. We've mentioned it many times here, but we'd love to have more people involved. It's very collaborative, very supportive, and it's getting to the point where there's 3 or 4 posts a day and lots of interaction. And I needed a little bit of help for the moderation of the group. And so I asked Shelby if he would help me out. He said he'd love to. And Jason, I want to highlight you specifically. So that's a drift here. He says, my dad's morgue file had no girly mags, unfortunately. And you sure he didn't meet Milo and not Burn? Jason is, like I said, become a very active member in the Facebook group. And he put a lot of energy into building a resource for all of us, which was a summary of the different recipes and I would say materials and methods used for comic book conservation. And Shelby is in the process of turning that into a doc that we can share. That'll be a living doc that'll be pinned in the Facebook page. And so nice. I want to thank you specifically, Jason, and I want to thank you also, Shelby, for taking that role on. So thank you.
Yeah, I just sent you the first draft that you can kind of start reviewing and editing. But yeah, very scientific approach. So if y'all need something, probably put you to sleep at night.
Exactly. Right.
You know, it'd probably be great. But no, thank you, Jason, for sticking a pin in us and getting us motivated to
absolutely
to do that. We've been talking about it, but we needed someone to get the ball rolling, and you were great to do that.
Yeah, and I want to thank everybody for hanging out with us every week. Yeah. I have had quite a few people ask me when I'm going to have some additional content other than the live show. And the truth is, I'm working on it. I'm actually making a lot of progress. So the way that I do things is often very nonlinear. I study a lot, I think a lot, I try a few things, and then I have a breakthrough. And I'm in one of those periods where I'm studying and practicing a lot of behind the scenes things. And I've done some things that I'm really excited about, actually, but not quite ready to share just yet. So please stay tuned. I appreciate everybody reaching out, and some folks have said, are you okay? I'm definitely okay. I'm just working on things that I do not yet want to present to the primetime audience. So thank you for coming here once a week anyway. And very soon, I promise we'll have some additional new content on the channel. Until then, you have you have Shelby creating a lot of content and posting regularly. Obviously, you have the other allies of the channel and the Facebook group, and the professor doing amazing work, and Jerry as always. So Larry is also on a bit of a hiatus just because of all the travel he's been doing. And I can tell you also, he's been doing some things behind the scenes. He works a bit differently than me in that he's a bit more empirical, and he just dives in with a hacksaw. But he's also making some significant progress. So we'll have a lot of interesting stuff to show you as it gets colder and we spend a bit more time indoors. And so thanks for sticking with us. I appreciate it. Again, I appreciate my co-hosts here, appreciate all the viewers. Thank you especially to the folks that gave us super chats, and have a great week, everybody. And until next time, take care of one another.
Thanks for tuning in for the chat. We love it. Community. Woo.
Shelby, do it, man.
All right. Hey, thank you all. We really appreciate you being here. Don't forget, I've been dropping videos 3 times a week. Tomorrow, you're going to see a video of a lot of cool Golden Age books at Bedrock City Comic-Con that I went to on Saturday. And you'll also get to see a small stack of what I purchased that you may see coming up in future projects. But with that, we're going to say peace, love, in comics. Bye.
Bye, y'all.
Bye, everybody.